Big 12 has released the conference schedules for the next 4 years, 2024 through 2027. Now everyone knows who they will play home and away. Obviously, not dates are released. They posted this on Wednesday. It's all anybody Big 12 fans have been talking about. So we're going to talk about it here. Joining me is a man who I know has many strong opinions about what has come out. He is Scott Wildcat of Boscoe's Boys. Scott, welcome back, man.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. And again, this has been something that we've been talking about ever since Colorado joined, is how the future of the conference would be scheduled. So while there's one pretty big thing that disappoints me, it's fun to finally be here. And now the countdown of when we get the actual schedule is on. What was it? Was it February or March this past year? Is that how long it took?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I hope it's not the same because you know what? There's a handful of games I'm going to go to and might need to do a little bit of extra planning surrounding some of them. So I'm pumped for it though. And you know, the new 16 team Big 12, it's going to be exciting. When I look at that, that's my big takeaway is, okay, the next 4 years is going to be very exciting.
I agree. Look, just as an Oklahoma State fan, like I haven't had season tickets since I was at OSU. And I'm looking at a schedule next year of like, you get Arkansas and non-con. Oh, by the way, you get Texas Tech, the Dust Bowl is back. You get Utah. You get Whittingham versus Gundy in Stillwater this next. Like, I might buy season tickets for Oklahoma State. And so there's plenty of reason to be excited, especially with the Four Corners schools joining and getting to face off with them. I think the thing that has been the biggest touch point for everybody I've seen on Twitter for the most part, there are some who aren't as upset, but even Bill Connolly of ESPN pointing out, like, it is seeing games that have become annual expectations on the schedule and the calendar no longer being annual games. Farmageddon, 3 of the next 4 years, not 4 years. The Butt Bowl, 3 of the next 4 years, not 4 years. West Virginia, Cincinnati, a game that we were looking forward to as being an annual matchup between two teams who used to face off in the Big East, 3 of the next 4 years. Like I said, the Dust Bowl, for me, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech just made a lot of sense if we were going to have a rivalry game, 3 of the next 4 years. The only rivalries, the only games that will be played every single year for the next 4, Arizona State, the holy war between BYU and Utah, TCU, Baylor, and Kansas State, Sunflower Showdown. That's it.
Come on, it's the Sunflower Showdown is after Bedlam dies is going to become the 4th longest continuous rivalry, man. How do you forget that one?
On the fly here. It's just, I think most fans I have seen, even fans from like Cincinnati, even fans from Houston, UCF, who just joined the Big 12 are like, we're not going to have any protected game. We're not going to have any new rivalries. And I understand that there has been an issue. Everyone and their dog has their own version of like, here's how this should be, the quad or the 3+6 or whatever. And I was on board the 3+6 more than the quad because of geography. And everyone has their version. But to not have given everyone a rivalry, and we've seen this in the Big Ten, they have a lot of protected rivalries. Not everyone has one. The ACC announced theirs. I think it was Louisville and Georgia Tech don't have an annual rivalry game. For the Big 12 to only protect 4, and I understand that the history in this conference is not here as far as membership that the Big 10 and the ACC currently have. But to only protect 4, not to even have like one for everybody, is disappointing to me because rivalries to me, or at least annual matchups, a game you know and look forward to on the schedule, are beneficial to college football. It's nice to play teams more often. It's nice to have some variety and to mix things up, but especially in a 16 time. And it's nice, let me just say this. It's nice that they have ensured that every single team will visit every other team in the conference at least once in the 4-year period. But I look forward, especially as an Oklahoma State fan who's not going to have Bedlam on the schedule anymore, to not have anyone you're going to know is on there every single year. I don't care who it is disappointing because I look forward to the games with Kansas State. I look forward to the games with Tech. I hate the Texas Tech's not on the schedule this year. Like I do. And I already missed that game. And so maybe I'll be more excited the year after an off year to get those games back on the schedule, but I'm going to be more disappointed like I am this year to not have the teams I want on there annually.
Yeah, I want to make sure that I don't say anything that I'm going to regret and lose people's trust. But this has been a much tougher task than I think anyone who was on the football scheduling committee, because there's a committee for football, there was a committee for basketball, and then I think there might have been one for baseball as well. And each one of those groups had a smaller, a quote unquote smaller sport, because for those athletes it's not smaller. So non-rev sport, however, Olympic sport, however you want to call it, they're all kind of in charge of a sub sport as well. And the football one was the most contentious. The football one was the one that had the most hostility. The football one is one where there were administrators who thought, some group of administrators were trying to get one over on them. And there was a much bigger battle than there ever should have been, about 8 versus 9. So above all, I'm glad that it's 9.
Yes.
I'm very glad that it is 9. But once it became 9, there was never going to be a perfect system. And I think part of it was some of the administrators either don't care or aren't really in tune with the games the fans really wanted. And it made it to the point where it became the most simple and idea that said, hey, we're not going to really protect anything. We're going to take care of the in-state schools that want to protect those games: K-State, KU, Arizona State, BYU, Utah, and which one am I leaving out? Texas Tech, TCU. Baylor, TCU. Baylor, TCU.
Yeah, Baylor, TCU.
Yeah, so it's really wild to me. And then I think, and again, this is not something that was explicitly told to me, but I think it's telling that Texas Tech and Houston, not a protected game, because if they wanted it to be, they could have, because the whole thing was, okay, we're only going to protect in-state games. And if Texas Tech and Houston wanted that to be a protected game, which I thought, hey, the two biggest of the Texas schools in the Big 12, I thought that would have made a lot of sense. Nope, they didn't want it. So it is interesting. Again, I understand why it is the way it is. It's disappointing from a K-State fan. I think K-State and Iowa State fans are probably the most upset about this, because, again, you are losing the longest running, never interrupted series in the history of college football. There is not a single game that has gone uninterrupted from its genesis longer than Farmageddon. And losing that, not because one of these teams are leaving the conference, but just because, conference leadership, administrators couldn't figure out a way to make things work. That's what's disappointing most to me. But it is, going to be fun seeing, Oklahoma State, 3 times, Iowa State 3 times, Colorado 3 times. It's going to feel like the old Big 8 a little bit, because K-State's going to have, for the first time in a while, 4 Big 8 schools on its schedule for the next 3 years. It's going to be weird as hell only having KU in 2027, which is another thing. I think they probably just threw all the games into a computer and just said, hey, please spit it out, because that does not make any sense in the world to me. Not keeping the Colorado game that K-State's going to play this upcoming year and shifting it to 2027, so you at least have 2 of those kind of historic Big 8 opponents. That makes no sense in the world to me. But I would guess that they just put it into a computer program and said, okay, K-State plays KU 4 times, Iowa State 3 times, yada, yada, yada. And that's what the computer spit out. So I get it. Very complex, but there are a few things that are a little disappointing, especially as K-State fans. And, it's the first time maybe ever that K-State and Iowa State fans are on the internet agreeing in almost unison.
Wow.
I've seen one K-State fan.
Unless it's Mandel related.
Yeah, well, yeah. That just feels like a fever dream at this point, Phillip. But it is disappointing. But as you said, the fact that you are getting Colorado, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State 3 times instead of one of those teams just twice, there is a little bit of comfort in that. Mm-hmm. I think looking at the 24, 25, and 26 schedules, I'm excited. Like those are awesome. And I might be dead before 2027. So if that happens, who cares? I'm not riding the Peloton as much as I should, Phillip. I was trying to make a joke at my own expense, but at least those 3 years, seeing those old familiar teams that I remembered playing, even before the Big 12 happened, that is going to be a ton of fun. And, as we mentioned before this was going, the mountain schools, they're playing a lot of each other. Again, there's only 2 protected games amongst all the mountain schools, but they're playing a lot of each other. I think for the most part, and we've kind of already done the nitpicking, for the most part, I think they did a good job with a difficult task that was made more difficult by their own doing.
If you want a positive takeaway from it, it's this. And if you haven't seen the metrics that Reddit CFB put out on Twitter, I think it's kind of helpful. Is the 3+6 model, which is what I wanted originally, which is 3 protected rivalries, and then you'd rotate through the other teams 6 at a time. And so you would play everybody in a 4-year period, just like this. You play on the road at everybody over a 4-year period. The difference there was you're going to play 3 teams 4 times in a 4-year period and everybody else twice. This does allow for your Mark mentioned rivalries in his statement, and I'm gonna see if I can pull it up. He did say, I'm grateful to our membership for their support through the scheduling process. In this model, competitive balance and student athlete wellness was prioritized. Rivalries will be protected and new matchups will be introduced. When he said protected, if your assumption to that is that we're going to play it every year, you're wrong. If it is, we're going to try and make sure that they remain on the schedule as much as possible. I do feel like that is kind of what they did. And then the student athlete thing, geography, because if you look at the way the schedule stacks up, now if you don't have a protected rival, so you're not going to play the same team every year, 4 years in a row, you're going to get 3 games against 6 teams as opposed to 4 games against 3. And so if you're, let's use Kansas State as an example here. You're going to get 3 games against Colorado, 3 against OSU, 3 against Iowa State, and 3 against Cincinnati. That's only 5 because you get 4 against Kansas because you've got that 4th game against Kansas. But if you take an Iowa State, it's 3 against Kansas State, 3 against Kansas, 3 against Oklahoma State, 3 against West Virginia, 3 against UCF and Cincinnati. You get Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, teams that you have been playing, teams that also make sense regionally, Cincinnati as well. You look at the 4 corner schools that are coming in. Most of their teams they're playing 3 times the next 4 years are the other corner schools. If you look at the Texas schools, if they don't have a protected rival like TCU and Baylor, most of the teams they're playing 3 times the next 4 years are the other Texas schools. So there is a lot of grouping together of this that makes sense regionally. Would I prefer West Virginia, Cincinnati 4 times? Yes. Would I prefer Oklahoma State, Texas Tech 4 times? Yes. Would I prefer to have at least 1 game on the schedule is there every year for every team? Especially ones that just make sense? Yes. Would I have loved Farmageddon to have been protected? Absolutely, it should be. But if we're looking for optimism here, there will still be some familiarity over the next 4 years of this where you're playing teams that make sense regionally more often than not.
Yeah, and that is, I think, where the hang-up happened when you were talking about before it became obvious that pods weren't going to be a thing. Everyone was trying to melt their mind to try to make pods work. Everyone was trying to melt their mind to make all this uniformity. It was never going to work like that. And I think we're seeing exactly why. When you have 4 or 5 schools actually in the mountain time zone with the 4 PAC mountain schools that came over and BYU, it was always going to be impossible to try to come up with different pods that was going to split one of them up. It was always going to be impossible having to send one of the Big 8 schools or Houston out east and going about it the way they did and not making exceptions, because I think that might have been part of the reason why they drew the line in the sand and said, all right, only in state, because then all of a sudden, okay, if you're giving K-State and Iowa State, if you're giving K-State a second one, well, then what about this person? And what about that person? And then all of a sudden you might be finding yourself in a situation where you can't see everyone at least twice, which I love about this schedule. I love that, unlike, the SEC, what was it? The stat that, Texas A&M had been in the SEC for like 14 years and only played like Auburn once or Florida.
I think Georgia still hasn't been to College Station.
Yeah, so they're going to prevent that, and that was a big part about having the 9-game schedule. And it works, and I understand, but it just kind of like you said, it would have made, I feel like they could have made an exception, still made it work, and given Oklahoma State and Texas Tech and given West Virginia, Cincinnati, because that's still, I'm still kind of struggling with that. And I would love to hear, especially from fan, I don't follow hardly any Texas Tech fans. Like, I wonder what their thoughts on this are. I don't follow any Utah fans because I don't want to. They scare me. I want nothing to do with them right now. But are they happy? Because the whole thing with them is that, a lot of Utah fans, we don't want to play BYU. Like, are they actually happy that rivalry is happening? There's no world in which
they don't get a choice there.
Oh, I know. There was no world where it wasn't going to happen. But like, I don't know. I don't know. We've been waiting for this moment, and it became evident that it was going to be something similar to this, and it's just exciting and sad at the same time. And I would love to sit down with Brett Yormark or any administrator who's on the football scheduling and put them in a lie detector test and really kind of grill them. But I don't think we'll ever get all the answers that we truly want.
I think that the takeaway you touched on, the last one I want to get to, is we've talked about this on the 10-12 podcast before. The uniformity of the ADs, the kumbaya, the around the campfire, the everyone singing, marching together in the same line is done. Once realignment was finished, once the four corners came, it became back to being about what's best for me and my school. And again, you as an athletic director, your primary job is the school that you represent. I'm not going to argue against that. That's fine. But this does feel like this is what we had to do because we couldn't get anybody to agree. If you want to call that a reflection on Brett Yormark as a leader, that's fine. If you want to call that as a reflection on certain athletic directors within the conference, that's also fine. You can take that, interpret it however you would like. The takeaway to me is this was the only way we could get this done in a reasonable time, like now, and not be sitting here in February and still fighting and arguing and bickering and things, because there's still a lot of other things that need to be figured out. I think this was the only way to get this done, was saying we have to set some basic rules. We're only protecting in-state rivalries, so no one can complain. There was disagreements from the ADs that I know of between how many rivalries should even have been protected, 1 versus 2 versus 3 versus any. And so I think this is the only way we could do this, to try and make as many people as happy as possible and piss off as few people as possible. And as usual, there's benefits, like I said. I think the fans are the ones that suffer the most, as always, with all things that change in college football. And this is just a byproduct of realignment and being a 16-team conference. Like, I'll take this as a win. We get the 9 games as opposed to 8 conference games.
It is 100% a win. The 9 games was the number one priority for me as a Big 12 fan, and it looked in doubt for a while. And so, all in all, net, this is a win.
Yeah, I think this is mostly a positive. Nothing is ever perfect. We were never going to be happy with whatever they did. They were never going to do pods, y'all, no matter how many times you argued with me about the way you could make it make sense in your head, which was always biased towards what you wanted, because there was never going to work for Houston. We're not going to talk about that. We're talking about what we have here. The more I look at it, the more I'm okay with it. I don't love it. There are things I don't like, but the more I look at it, the more I'm okay with it. The more teams you got more games against that made sense regionally is why this whole process makes a lot of sense. So if you haven't seen the tweet, I think we shared it. It's at Reddit CFB on Twitter. It's a very interesting schedule matrix. I want to hear you guys' thoughts. I want to hear fans' thoughts. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you think is good, what questions that you have. Of course, we'll talk about this more on Monday on the recap show with Andy and Jamie. If you're listening to this in audio form, hit us up on Twitter at 1012 Network. Hit us up on Instagram at 1012pod. 1012podcast@gmail.com is the email. If you just want to shoot me an email with your thought, I got notes, man. Like, that's fine. You send your entire referendum to me, and if I think it's worthwhile, I might just read it on the show on Monday. We might reserve half of Monday's show to this because it's my show and I'll do what I want. But appreciate it, Scott. Always appreciate your thoughts. This is something we're going to be talking about a lot. Oh, go ahead.
One final thing. I'm just going to throw this out there. There is a reason why they did 4 years versus 8 versus 12. Whether or not that's going to be changing in the next 4 years. I don't think it is, but I do think that there may be different leaderships at different spots, whether at schools, whether even inside the Big 12 in the next 4 years. And that is part of the reason why they only released a 4-year matrix versus 8 versus 12. Because it was always going to be 4 or 10 or 12. So I'll just throw
doesn't
that out
the
there.
TV contract only goes till 2030, right? Or is it 2031?
2031 is the final football season.
Okay. So you make sense to not want to have something preset if you're going to then start working on taking it back to market to separate football and basketball. I understand the 4 year. It makes complete sense.
Very, very true. But there was a format of this for 8 and 12 years that they're choosing not to put out there.
I think that's wise. I look, yes, do it for 4 years and figure out what works.
I agree.
If we've learned nothing from the AC except the ACC, it should be that don't ever lock yourself into something long term. This applies to all things in life, except maybe marriage. That you are, might not want to change around a little bit.
No, so, you're 100% correct.
I'm married, but common law, it's fine. It's whatever. I love my wife. I love all of you as well. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, we'll have the full Picks Pod up on Thursday. If you're watching this on YouTube, I just lost the train of thought. Yeah, I don't know how to wrap something that's going to be in 2 spots at once. So we're just going to wrap.
If you're watching on YouTube, please don't bully me in the comments. I'm very sensitive, so please do not do that.
Bully. All right, let's get this out of here.